And the number one thing Pablo Escobar spends his millions on is... Hello everyone, and welcome back to Lux, the channel dedicated to all things rich and luxurious. Pablo Escobar was a Colombian-born drug kingpin. Pablo Escobar ran the most infamous and violent drug cartels in history, the Medellin drug cartel. At the peak of its power, the Medellin cartel distributed 80% of the world's cocaine market. Along the way, Pablo and his cartel was responsible for thousands, possible even tens of thousands of murders. He was eventually imprisoned, but continued to run the Medellin cartel from inside of his prison. Using his connections, he escaped in 1992 and remained on the run until he was shot and killed on the rooftop of an apartment complex in 1993. It's estimated that Pablo Escobar's net worth peaked around $30 billion. Yes, that's right, $30 billion. And he spent it on everything from his looks to his trade, and everything he did to try to keep the money he had safe. Join us as we show you how Pablo Escobar spent his billions. Number 8. We can't really sugarcoat this, okay? The reason that Pablo Escobar was a billionaire was because he was in the drug trade. In the 1980s, Escobar and his cartel suppliers were some of the richest people in the world. Their cocaine trade was supplying America with 80% of its product. They were making over $400 million a week because of their trade. And at the time, the Colombian government didn't do much. And after certain life and death events, they led a raid on one of their warehouses and confiscated 13.8 metric tons of cocaine, dealing a $1.2 billion blow to the cartel. But for them, that was nothing. Literally, that was actually within the quote-unquote acceptable losses of their business. Now, you might think of how the world nowadays wouldn't treat this with such light gloves, but it should be noted that even when the Colombian and the United States governments decided to try and take down Pablo, it didn't take as much as you think it would right away. They had to struggle and fight and claw and even kill at times to try and not just to get to Escobar, but to keep him locked up for good. That's how good he was. He was able to keep his trade going no matter what. And at one point, that we'll talk about later, he actually kept his trade going while he was in prison. That's dedication. Number 7. Rubber bands. I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute. Did Pablo Escobar really have a thing for rubber bands? Was he a collector? Making a giant rubber band ball? What? That would be funny if that was the case. But no, that wasn't what happened here. While Pablo Escobar was a man who knew how to do fun things, he was actually rather meticulous in regards to how to keep his money organized and safe. And because he was making so much of it, again, over $400 million a week, he had to keep it all contained and organized in stacks that could be easily distributed. And how do you bundle up large stacks of cash? Rubber bands! According to his accountant, who happened to be his brother, in a book he wrote, Pablo spent about $2,500 a month on rubber bands that were meant solely to bundle up the money. That means that in a year, Pablo and his cartel spent $30,000 on rubber bands. I mean, I'm sure I could find some people who would want $30,000 worth of rubber bands, but that'd be for more of a fun thing, not a, quote, I need to protect my money kind of thing. The more you know, right? Number 6, hiding spaces. You might think that with so much money being made, that he was made in the shade with lemonade with no cares in the world. That might be true on an objective level. But once you dive into the particulars about what it's like to be a drug kingpin, you do find problems. Escobar's immense wealth became problematic when he couldn't launder his cash quickly enough. He resorted to stashing piles of cash in Colombian farming fields, dilapidated warehouses, and in the walls of cartel members' homes, according to Robert Escobar, Pablo's brother we mentioned earlier in his book, The Accountant's Story, Inside the Violent World of the Medellin Cartel. Escobar wrote, quote, Pablo was earning so much that year, we would write off 10% of the money because the rats would eat it in storage, or it'd be damaged by water, or lost, end quote. That's right, he was making so much money that he had to spend money just to hide it. Think about that for a second. Think about all that profit that he must be making in order to do that. In fact, that's part of the joke in terms of the eventual capture of Pablo Escobar, because his money is still out there, hidden to many. In fact, it was so well hidden at points that a TV show was made about it. Number 5. Submarine. Enter two ex-CIA agents who decided to take a look themselves at the places where Pablo Escobar might have hid everything. They even got a Discovery Channel out of the deal to showcase their journey to find the treasure. It was called Finding Escobar's Millions. I guess they couldn't call it Finding His Billions because that would be unlikely, but whatever. Clues were hard to come by, and they had to dig deep into the life of Pablo Escobar to find what they were looking for. Eventually, the two agents found a submarine that Escobar had used to smuggle some of his drugs off the coast of Puerto Rico. Inside said submarine was a large box, one that contained $3.2 million worth of items. How the submarine got there, by intent or by accident, is unclear, but there's no doubt that Pablo bought and used the submarine for various things. And it once again highlights just how crafty a businessman he was. Drug submarines used to be a joke in the industry because they were handmade, but now they're one of the biggest threats in regards to getting drugs inside of countries without being detected. And whether it's homemade or bought, submarines cost millions. Number 4. Fire. Okay, I know this sounds weird, but I promise this makes sense. You see, Pablo Escobar didn't spend money to make fire. That would be a little weird. Rather, he used money to make a fire. Confused? This story came from his son, Juan Pablo, who regaled a magazine once with stories of what it was like to be related to one of the most infamous men on the planet. One story he told was that his family was hiding out from the authorities once, and his sister, Manuela, was sick. In fact, she was getting so cold that she was getting hypothermic, which, for the record, is very bad in someone so young. Not wanting her to get worse, Pablo used $2 million worth of banknotes and made a giant fire so that she could get warm. That's right, Pablo burned up to $2 million in order to get his daughter warm. That's impressive. And it shows that while he was a notorious drug kingpin, he did care about his family, and that's to be respected at some level. Number 3, the community. Still don't think that Pablo Escobar was a good guy at some points? Well, here's the thing. Not only was he not a fool in regards to his business, he also wasn't a fool in terms of keeping a good public image. Because when you usually think of drug kingpins, you think of guys who want nothing more than money and will kill to get it. But for Pablo, he had all the money and power he could ever want, so he decided to give out money to the people of Colombia. He was so generous at points that they literally called him Robin Hood. He would hand out stacks of cash to the poor. He would build homes for those that didn't have one. He's on the record for building 70 community soccer fields, and even a zoo. So yeah, he liked to give back. Number 2, prison. What's that? Pablo spent money on a prison? Oh yeah, he actually built his own prison called the Cathedral. He designed it himself, and then when he went to prison one time, it was to that prison. In the term of his agreement with the Colombian government, Escobar was allowed to select who was in prison with him and who worked in the prison. He could also continue to run his cartel business and receive visitors. La Catedral, forgive my Spanish, was equipped with a soccer field, barbecue pit, and patios, and it was nearby another compound he built for his family. Also, the Colombian authorities were not allowed within 3 miles of his prison. And then he used his money and knowledge of the prison he built to escape it in grand and bloody fashion. Yup, he did that. And the number one thing Pablo Escobar spends his millions on is his house and parties? So, for the most part, we've used this list to talk about some of the unconventional and unexpected things that Pablo did with his money. But make no mistake, he loved to live it up, especially in one of his favorite places in the world, Miami, Florida. He not only lived there, he had a mansion that once it was put on the market was worth $15.9 million. And technically, it was worth a lot more. He not only used this massive mansion as a safe house for some of his money, 2 massive money safes were found in it after it was seized by authorities, but he would also hold massive parties that he would spend his ill-gotten gains on. What's the house like? Well, it's kind of gone. Yeah, it was burned to the ground in 2016. but the lot itself is still on sale. So, what do you think? What do you think of these things that Pablo Escobar did with his billions? Can you believe the things that he was able to do with all of that money? Did you think that some of what he did was beyond the scope in terms of buying things? Let me know in the comments below. And thank you for watching Lux, the channel dedicated to all things rich and luxurious. If you like this video, make sure to check out some of our other videos. And to be notified when we release new videos, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Until next time.